What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 155 of the Just an Insight podcast, a show where we talk to people involved in the world of alternative music and discover their journey through it. As always, I am your host, Tim Birkbeck, and as always, well, not as always, but at the moment, coming to you from another week in lockdown, still surviving, but we're back. We're here with another episode. Just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who checked out our returning episode to the podcast world last week with Stu Ross from Misery Signals and Comeback Kid. I was a little bit anxious, kind of getting back on the horse, so to say, but I'm glad that episode got a good sort of response and got a few people talking, which is nice to see because it's not something I necessarily kind of did before. I didn't really kind of engage with where people were listening to it and stuff, but it was nice to see people sharing the episode and stuff. So if people want to do more of that, awesome. We're on all the socials. Just search Just an Insight podcast. You'll be able to find us and all that malarkey. Whilst I'm on a bit of self-promotion, just a reminder, if you want to support this podcast, whether it's your first time listening or the 155th time you're listening, as always, if you can subscribe, rate, review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, then that goes a million miles to help us reach more listeners. And as I say, if you share this on your own social media feeds, share it, I can't talk, share it on your Instagram story, give us a retweet, it really, really helps us, and it makes me happy when I see those things, so make me happy, please. Thanks. Also, as mentioned last week, but we've updated our Patreon, so if you fancy supporting us that way, head over to patreon.com/Just an Insight podcast, and you can see the different tiers of benefits that we're offering on that as well. Finally, just one more thing before we get into the show proper. If you want a double dose of me this week, my good friend and former guest on this podcast, Simon Walker from Rash Decision, Monolithian, and various other projects that he does, he invited me on his podcast, the Seabin podcast, which was loads of fun. It's a really cool show. If you don't know about it, it's basically like punk rock room 101. So it's real fun on there. So that's also out today, Tuesday. So if you want to head over to Spotify, search Seabin podcast, and hear me rant and ramble about things that grind my gears. So yeah, and a massive shout out to Sai again for asking me to be on that podcast. It was an honour and a real good laugh. Right, so this week, my guest, I'm joined by organ player and vocalist of the awesome Winter Passing, Kate Flynn. I really enjoyed having this chat with Kate because I've had the opportunity to meet her a few times, but we've never really had like an in-depth, turned Australian, in-depth conversation with them. So it was really nice to sit down and have a proper chat with them and get to know them a bit better. We discussed her kind of living out her pop fantasy through some of the band's newer material, which we get into in the conversation. How she's kind of come to terms with dealing with her own anxieties and sort of all the things that surrounding mental health that she's kind of gone through, and what it's kind of meant to her growing up and seeing other women in punk, and how she was kind of drawn to that and how that sort of formed her as a woman in some aspects. I hope I haven't kind of spoken out of turn in that phrase, but yeah, it's all kind of explained in the conversation as always. I'm paraphrasing. But also just want to say this was recorded slightly ahead of the release of the Winter Passing's new album, which is called New Ways of Living. You can pick that up now on Big Scary Monsters Records. It's also on all your various streaming platforms. Anyway, sit back, enjoy the chat I have with Kate, and I'll see you on the other side. Joining me this week on the Just an Insight podcast is vocalist and organ player of the Winter Passing, Kate Flynn. Kate, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to join me. How are you? How's life? How's lockdown treating you at the moment?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, lockdown's been weird for me. I suppose like I was still kind of working throughout it. I work like I'm a support worker for adults with intellectual disabilities, so I was kind of
Mm.
working throughout it. It was strange, honestly. Now, like the restrictions have been lifted a little bit in Ireland. I actually feel like I kind of missed the quarantine a little bit. I think like my anxiety around like having to go back outside into like, you know, filled streets with cars and stuff like is kind of more daunting to me than having no cars out on the streets.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's weird, isn't it? Because like obviously here's still a bit different because we're still technically in lockdown, but things are starting to ease. But I remember like before things were lifted, and there was still that like there was that really hot weekend, and people were like going down the beach and
yeah,
things. And like I live on the south coast, so it was like I just wanted to take my dog for a walk, and then all of a sudden there was like these hundreds of people, and I'm like, oh, sort of thing. So
yeah,
yeah, a bit weird.
for
But
sure.
what like what's it been like in Ireland? Because obviously we can only sort of go off what we hear on the news, sort of thing. So has it been dealt with well over there, or is it kind of a similar situation to here?
It was dealt with, I mean, pretty well. I suppose I think we went into lockdown a little bit earlier than the UK did. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it was dealt with pretty well, but it's in I mean during the circumstances, I don't even know what well constitutes, but like you know,
Yeah.
it's definitely a strange one, and like Ireland has been kind of in the last like week or two like most restrict like I think you know hairdressers and barbers and all that kind of stuff went back to work yesterday, so
Yeah.
it's been honestly for me I'm like kind of like I'm so happy to see like you know like my brother is a barber, so I'm so happy to see him go back to work. I know that he was missing it, but at the same time I'm kind of like, oh god, this all feels a little bit too soon or something. It's kind of like
Yeah.
a bit
Yeah.
daunting or whatever. But I suppose like you know people I don't know, maybe where I'm from, like people are really respectful of like social distancing and like you know wearing masks and stuff like that as well. So um I think as a country we've probably like kind of banded together well. There are obviously the certain groups that haven't done that and like
Yeah.
continue to do anything else but you know just follow the rules for a little while and we'll all be over kind of a thing. But um I suppose in terms of like even the numbers and stuff, like they're not kind of, it's not the way it was over the first couple of weeks. They are kind of stabilizing a little bit, which is
Yeah.
to see. But yeah, it's definitely a weird thing. I can't believe like we're living through this. It's kind of like
Yeah. I know. I keep saying to like friends of mine and my parents and things like it'd be really interesting to see, like, not just because of the whole pandemic thing, but just everything that's gone in this first 6 months of the year, like how 2020 is going to be looked back on in history. Like, it's just such a weird year, but
I saw this
yeah.
meme of like somebody, you know, even like saying 2020 and like someone just like having all these like kind of thoughts back to like the trauma of like, you know,
Yeah.
face masks and, you know, Zoom calls. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's so like it's funny, but like at the same time, like I can understand that like this year for like myself included, like has just been like what happened? It feels just like
Yeah.
someone put
Yeah.
like a standstill on time for everybody, you know,
Yeah.
which is
Because
definitely
whereabouts in Ireland are you at the moment then? Because I
so.
know obviously Rob's in Dublin, but where are you?
Yeah, so I'm in like Rossgrey, Tipperary. It's like smack bang in the middle of Ireland, the middle of nowhere. Yeah, so like it's a tiny little town. That's where like me and Rob and Jamie from the Winter Pass and all grew up. Um,
Right.
well, it's like a really really small town. Um, so it's kind of actually quite a number of the COVID cases were in my town. In
Oh shit.
Ireland, yeah, because a factory here had like a major outbreak of it, and it like I mean it's kind of the type of town that like there's the factory, and then there's the place I work, which is like a charity for adults with intellectual disabilities. And because the town is so small, like these two employers are the employers of the whole entire town.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's like genuinely, when the factory went down, we were like, oh god, it's the end of the world, because
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
Well, the reason I asked is because I wasn't sure if you'd kind of been able to the opportunity to sort of like see family, see Rob, and think. But I know obviously like your parents obviously of in that town and stuff.
There
So
is that.
have you been able to sort of
Yeah,
see
I
them
went
and
out
things?
quite, like, I mean, we in Ireland were allowed at like a 5 kilometer distance for like quite some time, and like I was thankfully able to, like, that was within like my house and my parents' house. So I kind of went out, like, and would just like do a little bit of a drive by and stay in the car and say hello. And like my mom turned 60 during quarantine as well. So
Oh wow.
yeah, so we kind of had like this social distance, birthday party out in our backyard.
Yeah.
And like Rob was on like an iPad, like at one end of the table. So it was like, yeah, it was just weird. Like it's definitely not the way that I would have liked to celebrate her 60th, but like at the same time, we just like keep saying like we're never gonna forget it, ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was really, really grateful that I was able to like still see them, to be honest. Because like I would be a little bit of a home bird, and really family orientated as a human. So like I just, like, it would have killed me not to be able to see them.
Yeah.
But I only got to see Rob, God, it could have been like 2 weeks ago, when he came down, which, because they were kind of allowed to travel a little bit further then. And
Yeah.
it was just, even seeing him, or even having like been around anybody, it was just kind of like, oh wow, this feels
Yeah.
like outer body-ish kind of,
Yeah, no, I get that. Well, we'll get on to more exciting things and talk about music and your journey and stuff. Usually I kind of start this with like, how did you get into alternative music? But you've said in previous interviews and things like this, and I think it's a weird kind of coincidence you kind of share with your brother in some aspects, but your kind of introduction to music was your love of Britney Spears. So, why Britney? What drew you to her?
I guess, well, what it was actually was that, I guess my dad, he brought me home VHS of like a Britney live in concert. So like my dad works on the road, like he's a salesman. So he kind of sometimes would just end up like coming home with these like things that like you would never find anywhere. But like at the time, I guess, that, he just came home one day and was like, oh, I got you this, and he put it into the VHS player. And I just absolutely fell in love with Britney Spears. I literally learned off all of the words. I learned off like all the dances. Like it, I still love Britney Spears to this day.
Yeah.
Her Instagram is like my favorite thing to go. It's self-care for me to go and look at Britney Spears. It's like but yeah, I think what drew me towards her, I think it was probably just timing, to be honest, Tim. Like, wait, what age I was, what was on the television at the time.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of just like followed that path for like a long time. I mean, I went from Britney Spears to Christina Aguilera to Avril Lavigne. Avril Lavigne was probably maybe my turning point, some may say.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was Jimmy Eat World and stuff like that. It took a
Yeah.
very weird road for me, but yeah, you're right. Me and Rob did kind of share that thing, because he was like crazy about the Spice Girls and
Yeah.
Hanson
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah. I think it was because as well where we were in Ireland, like we didn't have like music channels or anything like that. So for a long time, it was just popular music that was like we were exposed to, or country
Yeah.
music, something that like my dad listened to. So I think it was just like what was on the television for us, or who was popular at that time,
Yeah, I just think the reason I think it's quite interesting now, because we'll obviously get on to the new record later on down the line, but there's a bit more of a pop sensibility to it. So obviously knowing that both you and Rob had that kind of love for pop music back when you were children, sort of thing, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely does make sense. And honestly, sometimes it's kind of like this subconscious thing as well. Like I don't even tend to like think about it, but like so many of my roots are like grounded in pop music or country music actually. Like
Yeah.
so it's kind of not even a thing I think about when I'm singing or like in any way create music, but sometimes somehow it is always the ground level. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you said like kind of discovering Avril Lavigne, and that kind of then led on to sort of things like Jimmy Eat World and stuff like that. So how were you kind of discovering those bands, and kind of, I guess, the kind of path that led you down the more alternative route? What was it, seeing Avril in her sort of skate pants and things like that, that kind of, oh, I want to listen to that kind of thing?
Yeah, like I mean, again, I think Avril Lavigne was just you know, well, to be fair, I still love Avril Lavigne, so like it's not in, to say anything against her, but I suppose at the same time, I think it was just you know, time and place, who was popular at the time, and Avril Lavigne like took on like a really popular stance at that time, and then I suppose like how I kind of transitioned into other bands then I guess was a lot through Rob actually.
Mm.
That he kind of started kind of coming home with like, Krang magazine and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, you should check out this band. Like, you should check this band out. And we would check them out and I'd be like, oh wow. And I suppose like I kind of like, obviously Rob is my only sibling as well. So like it was kind of like music was the thing we bonded over.
Yeah.
And like we got excited about together. So um like I kind of always took Rob's word for when he said, you should check this band out. And I suppose that's how I kind of started I suppose I kind of listening to a bit more alternative music was through Rob.
Yeah. And like, was there kind of any bands that, even though like Rob was maybe showing them to you and things, was there a band that you can remember that you kind of discovered off your own back, and you were like, okay, now this is my band, sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I guess I think I went through a stage where I like only listened to like Riot Girl punk for like a long time.
Okay.
Um yeah, so like there was a couple of girls a bit older than me in school, and like I literally was like, you are all the coolest people ever. And like
Yeah.
and they made me like a mix CD and like started giving me like Distiller CDs. And I kind of like started finding a lot of bands through that. So I guess like the Distillers for me was the thing that was like, this is my band, this is mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also like bands like Bratmobile and Bikini Kill, obviously Sleater Kinney. So they were all bands that like I now would see myself as like being huge inspirations to me. And I
Mm.
think, yeah, so like if it wasn't for those girls in school who were like 10 times cooler than I was, I probably would have been like, still, not that it's any harm like Rob telling me like, oh, you should listen to the band, but I'm really glad like that I kind of forged a little bit more of a a path with towards the cooler girls in school to be like, you
Yeah.
listen to this band, or you'd love this. And so yeah, I think that it was kind of through um Riot Girl, punk girls in school that were like, that's how I started forging and like trying to find out a little bit more about bands like that.
So, and like, I remember again reading in a previous interview that you've done, and you kind of touched upon it there, that like you said that you were kind of gravitated towards band, maybe not sort of like consciously, but more subconsciously, but by bands and artists that had women in
Yeah.
them, sort of thing. So, was that something that, I don't know, like, as I say, I don't want to say it was like a conscious decision, like you were seeking out women in bands, but like, was there that relatability that you had because you were a woman discovering music, that you were like, oh, this, I feel akin to this kind of thing?
I think it actually was a conscious thing, to be honest. I think it really was that like I wanted to um I wanted to see more people like me, I suppose. Like, up doing what like I was going to hopefully one day do. And I think it's a relatability thing as well. It was kind of like being able to like relate a bit more. And it's not like, I don't think it's like because like, you know, the sensationalization of like, oh, they're women, but it was more so that
Yeah.
I connected with their music a little bit more, I suppose. And I still kind of do. That's just how it is. Um,
Yeah.
but that's not to say that like I only listen to music with women in it either. Like it's like, it just, for me at that age, it was like such a turning point to be able to see like, you know, oh, women get up and play music like this, and like
Yeah.
and that's a normal thing. Because like, you know, when my family got like channels, like we, like in Ireland there's only 4 channels that you get like on national television for free. So like when we eventually got, you know, Scuzz and all them other channels, like I only saw men for such a long time on those channels, and I was kind of like, you know, this, when I started kind of like listening to bands like with women in it, it was kind of like, why are all these women on the television? Like, why, you know,
Yeah.
why are they not there? And so I think it was kind of a thing of like me seeking out what I was like kind of hoping to see on television all that time, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an interesting sort of perspective, because I think like this isn't to sort of diminish or sort of, I'm trying to word this in the right way so it doesn't sound weird, but like I think a lot of sort of women who are kind of our age sort of thing, when they're coming up, as you mentioned, like you, all you see is men in bands sort of thing, and I think at that age, like that's kind of accepted. So I think it's quite interesting that you kind of went the other way and kind of you were actively seeking sort of these women in bands. So I don't know, where did that kind of, was it just a curiosity, or was it, I don't know, was your mindset just kind of set on that sort of thing?
I think it was, I think when my mind was just set on it, I just wanted to kind of, I think I've always been a little bit more intrigued of anything that like has women like kind of heading it, to be honest. And like books, music, anything really. Like it's just,
Mm,
I think I just connect more on a level with women. But, you know, I think it was also because like I loved music, I love singing, and I just kind of couldn't really see, you know, where's the gap? Where do I fit into this? You know, like obviously Rob had been playing in bands for a bit longer than, you know, I was, and you know, it was only when I started kind of going up to like gigs up in Dublin that I actually, like, I mean, even at that time there wasn't really that many women in bands in
yeah.
in Dublin, like, you know. And for me that was kind of like, not that it was defeating or anything, because like I still got up and got into a band and went and played shows, but it was just kind of, you know, it almost made me feel like I was the odd one out because there wasn't many of us, if that makes sense.
Mm.
um so I guess like I did kind of actively seek it out because I kind of wanted to actively feel a part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, 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 I get that. And then in terms of you kind of pursuing your own kind of musical sort of career, so to say, obviously we know you now for both vocals and playing sort of the organ in the Winter Passing, but and again you've kind of said you've had a affiliation and love for singing. So where did that kind of come from? Is it back to going singing in front of Britney, or where has that kind of come from?
I think so. Well, like our household would have been like pretty musical anyway. Like my dad is a singer, and like he plays like in pubs and stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, we've always been reared in a really musical family. So I think I've been like singing since I was like probably able to like talk or even just mumble stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, definitely kind of growing up with pop culture and, you know, growing up like loving Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and all like the, you know, icons of that time. Like I just could not imagine my life without being a singer. So
Yeah.
I just, you know, I was like, I have to be Britney Spears, and that is, there is no question to it. So I think like my love for singing came from an early age of, you know, probably wanting to be Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears. But
Yeah.
I think it's, for me, I still consider it my instrument.
Yeah.
So then the keyboard, or, you know, the very small guitar I play, like, you know, it's literally, I still see singing as my instrument, you know. It's a thing that
Mm.
like I get excited about when I hear other singers. You know, it's kind of like
Yeah.
when I talk to the guys about like, you know, when we're talking about music and stuff, like lyrics and singing is always the thing I like tune into. Whereas like, you know, Jamie could be like obviously listening to guitar parts, Marty and Rob, and, you know, Kev is probably the same. Whereas I'm like genuinely excited about like, whoa, the tone of that person's voice is so cool, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um So yeah, I think like I just kind of always felt as if like that's my instrument. It was the thing that I,
Yeah.
you know, I think it was kind of more like that. That's mine, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So when did the kind of sort of whole kind of keyboard piano sort of aspects come into things then? Because was that just something that you were interested in and started dabbling with? Like, where did that all come into it?
Yeah, so I think like our parents have always been like really supportive of the whole, you know, playing music thing. So they just like were like, do you want to like pick up what instrument do you want to play? And I suppose like I kind of didn't really kind of like think about it too much. I was like, I think I want to play the piano. So we got lessons with like this local girl from the town, and I did like a couple of like the actual, you know, like the grades that you have to go through. I can't
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
how many I got through, but it was crap anyway. Fucking hated it. I was like, this is sucks. I don't want to play all this shit. But now I'm kind of like, I wish I like, you know, put in an effort, and because like that
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
me
yeah.
like sick to me now. But I think back then it kind of almost felt like a little bit of a forced thing. Like, oh, I don't want to do all these grades. I just want to learn
Yeah.
to play music. Which is kind of a funny thing when you think about going and learning an instrument. Like, it really should be just like, just do it for the love of it. Because I think once you start, well, maybe some people are different, but like for me, I definitely feel like, you know, if you put like a task in place for me, I'm just like, but now it feels like I can't have fun with it. You know, it's like I have to get really good to pass this grade to go on to another
Yeah,
grade.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I just kind of started like picking up piano from like then, I guess, and I just never really stopped. I don't think I'm fantastic at it or anything, but I do love it. I love the piano. I love anything with a piano in it. I just think it's like, you know, it just I think especially like it instrumentally, it just like adds so much without being the overpowering thing. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, that's kind of where piano kind of started for me, you know.
yeah.
Nice, you know, it's such a cool thing that, you know, to just like go in and just like stop on a few chords in like, you know, in my next room, like right in there. It's like it's such a what is it? It's kind of like self-care, kind of just like going in
Yeah,
and just,
yeah. It's
you know
like
what I mean?
your um sort of place of haven sort of thing.
Yes, exactly. We were both
Yeah.
thinking of the same thing. We just could not get it out.
And then in terms of like you actually performing, like, well, because I remember like speaking to Rob that he said that you kind of did like covers bands and things like that. But did you ever kind of do anything of your own accord, like I don't know, like solo or anything like that, or have you? Has it always been bands that you've kind of been latched to?
Well, I've always, when I was in school, like I used to kind of like join like the choir and like, you know, like the school choir or whatever,
Yeah,
and do all like the school concerts and stuff like that. Yeah, I suppose like I have not really kind of ever done anything soloish. You know, but I don't, I don't know how I feel about doing it soloish, to be honest. I think I'd feel very alone in the situation. I'd be, you know, no one to like, you know, grab onto or something. But
yeah, yeah.
you know, it's definitely not a thing I think about doing, really, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I will go write my own.
But then in terms of like your kind of musical exploration, like what made you kind of, because I guess as you say, like learning the grades and things like that, and then obviously having this love for singing,
Mm,
like was it always I don't know, because like some like musicians I know, they kind of are just obsessed with the, I guess, the academic kind of side of things, and
mm.
they're purely session musicians. They don't go out and play shows and things like that. But was that always something? Did you always have that need to want to perform, kind of thing?
I think I did without even knowing it, really. Like I think it was when I actually first started playing shows with like Winter Passing, like I kind of realized that like, oh yeah, this is kind of where I feel really at home and really like um I feel like myself there.
Yeah,
And I didn't really like, you know, think of that when, you know, when I started like loving singing and like making that my instrument. I didn't really have like a game plan as to where I was going to go with, because I actually had no idea at the time where or what I could do, only sing, But
Mm.
I think when I started like, actually touring and stuff, it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is exactly like, what I actually needed to do with my instrument. And I think as well as that, like for me, like I suppose that around the time I started touring as well, like a lot of my friends would have been kind of traveling in different formats. They would have been
Yeah.
going to America and working for the summer. They would have been, doing lots of different things that people of 18 would have been doing at the time, which are all things that I wanted to do. I suppose I wanted to travel. I wanted to see parts of the world. I wanted to experience new things. But I think through touring and through winter passing, like I got to do what I really wanted to do without even knowing it, to be honest. It
Yeah.
was like playing music with my friends, performing because I actually really loved it. To be honest, I never really thought that I was going to be the type of person that would love performing, because
Yeah.
I'm quite shy, to be honest, and I'm a little bit kind of like introverted in that sense. So it's for me, it was kind of like, oh wow, here I am. This like, oh, here you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like it kind of fulfilled that need for me at that age as well, like of being 18, like literally out of college, or sorry, out of school, like into college, being like, I want to travel, I want to like experience things, but I always knew I was going to experience it in a bit of a different subculture.
Mm.
So for me, that was touring and performing and music and being
Yeah.
in England and Europe and stuff, and America now. Like, so
Yeah.
that for me was kind of like, I guess it was my outcome of like knowing I love singing. I just didn't know I was ever going to end up in any of them places,
Yeah.
you know?
And then in terms of kind of like actually, I know that obviously Robin had kind of been in other bands before the Winter Passing started, and he kind of asked you to join. But was there a sort of a moment that you can remember, like I don't know whether it be going to a gig or, as you say, kind of seeking out these bands that had women in them? Was there a moment that you can remember, like, oh, this is something that's attainable. This is something that I can do, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I kind of had been going to like quite a few gigs up in Dublin, like, with the lads in their former band, and a couple of my friends from there as well. And I guess, like as I said, I think there wasn't many women in the scene at that time, but
Yeah.
I suppose around that time there would have been a band called Kate's Party,
Mm.
who some good friends of ours now, who are in a band called Pillow Queens.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this was Sarah's like former band. So when I first saw Kate's Party, I was kind of like, what? I can do this? Like,
Yeah.
I was literally kind of like blown away, because it was kind of like it had been like the first time I had seen like, women on a lineup, if I'm being honest, and especially
Yeah.
Flynn at the time. And then I guess, like, as well as that, like around that time, it would have been around that time that like Title Fight, Transit, entered over it, like, and what other kind of bands? Yeah, and like I think of those bands, like they all toured through Dublin, and I again
Yeah.
didn't see any women. Um, so seeing an Irish band with like women in it for me was like a big kind of I don't know, I was like a deer in the headlights, really. I was kind of like, he was like, whoa, this is attainable. I can do this. Like, I didn't really ever know how or who I was going to do it with, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
me and Rob kind of always said that we would have a band together at some point. Because like I always like was such a big fan of their bands and stuff. And I kind of always secretly wanted to be in them anyway.
Yeah.
But like, I suppose when I saw Kate's Party, I was kind of like, oh yeah, cool. Like, this is exciting for me. Like, it makes the
Yeah.
whole thing more exciting,
Mm. And I don't want to kind of go through the whole sort of backstory of the Winter Passing, because both you and Rob have spoke about it at length
Yeah,
in various
sure.
other interviews, sort of thing. But for me, like I kind of came across you when A Different Space of Mind came out, and I think that was kind of the jumping in point for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it was very much for me personally. It was very much like right time, right place sort of thing. In terms of, I was listening to that type of music, and like there were songs on that record that like really hit with me, sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I don't know, was there like a moment that you can remember, especially off that first record, that you kind of thought like, oh, like we're not just this band from a little town in Ireland. Like people in the UK, people in America actually give a shit about us, kind of thing.
Yeah. Um, do you know what? I think what was that big realization to me was like after our like fourth or fifth, like maybe not fourth or fifth, but maybe like third or fourth maybe tour around the UK, where we actually had
Yeah.
friends, and we actually had people who were like becoming like not just acquaintances, and not people who were just putting us on, not really knowing who we were. And they actually, I have some of my best friends through touring at that time with the Winter Pass, and still to this day.
Mm.
And I think even that for me is like such a thing of like, oh wow, like this thing that we created in the backyard in a shed of our house in the middle of Tipperary has got us on a boat with all of our gear uh, to, to this place, and now we're friends with these people, and we're excited to see each other, and we're excited to come back. And you know even now, like, that's still kind of astonishing to me that like that is what music can do.
Mm.
But yeah, I think maybe as well, like probably when we signed 6131 was probably like a, yeah, probably was like a thing like, oh wow, like as in
Yeah, yeah.
we did that, like we did that. And we
Mm.
kind of thought that we were never going to do anything like that. We just kind of were playing music to play shows and go touring and travel a little bit. Like we didn't really kind of, guess we didn't really see that in sight for ourselves. So I think that for us was kind of like a really big point where we had been like, wow, like we are still just these people from just this place, but now like these people are interested, and that's cool,
Yeah.
you know?
And going out on like your first tour, sort of, well, over here anyway. Like, I don't know. Like, did you kind of have any sort of preconceived ideas of what touring life would be like? Like, did they live up to that at all? Like, what was your kind of
Oh,
experience going on the road
I
the
didn't,
first time?
I did not know what I was getting into. Like, our first tour was with a band called Forest from
Yeah.
Wales, a great band, and still one of my fondest memories actually of touring. But to be honest, I had no idea what I was getting into. Like, I just knew I wanted to get into a band and play music in England. Like, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Deadly is going to be great crack. Like, but I think none of it phased me, if I'm being honest. Like, it didn't phase me like DIY touring. Like, I loved it, to be honest. You know, I still do, which is, kind of a good thing to say when you're like pushing 27, having slept on
Yeah.
floors for a good 7 years of your life. Like, so, but yeah, I didn't really expect much. I wasn't expecting it to be fantastic, and I wasn't expecting it to be bad either. I had no expectations. Um, and I think that's what made it all the better.
Yeah.
Because I just went in completely blind to the situation. I guess like as well, like it was just like it was a great tour to be our first tour as well. Because like,
Yeah.
I can't even remember if many of the shows were well attended, but like I remember the fun we had, and like just like, you know, we slept in the van one of the nights, and that was like,
Oh God.
yeah, it was like such a funny experience, because it was like I'd never been on an experience like this before ever, like, so we all like slept in a van, and like two of the lads like slept in, like the very back of the van where all the gear was,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
on top of gear, while everybody else just
Oh God.
and that was like one of my first experiences of being on tour, and I was like, oh, this is cool, it's like we're camping, it's like, cool.
And because you said like obviously you joined the Winter Party when you were sort of 18, and
Mm,
like obviously I know bands do start young and things, but I think for you to have had this kind of longevity, I know obviously again, don't mean this to be a diminishing thing, but you haven't always been super active, but that's because personal life and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. But I don't know, like when you were kind of younger, starting out, like I guess kind of going back to that kind of deer in the headlights kind of scenario, like I don't know, were you just sort of like eager to soak everything in and just experience as much as you wanted, sort of thing? Because I think I don't know, like touring now for me personally, like I still absolutely love it, but I have a very much a kind of business acumen of how I approach things. Like I need to be here at this time, I need to be doing this at that time, sort of thing. Whereas before I was just sort of like, yeah, tour, sort of thing. So I don't know, like has your attitude changed? Like, do you still have that excitement with things?
I definitely have excitement, but it's definitely a different kind. Like I think like the first couple of tours I was kind of like, oh my God, we're going on tour. I'm taking like a week off of like my job in the bar, and college is finished. I'm really excited to just get out there and stuff. But like now it's different because we're all at different like stages of life now as well, like different like personal things. And it takes like a lot of organization to get stuff in order for us. I still get like a huge sense of excitement, but I guess yeah, it's a different sense of excitement. It's kind of like, as well as like, not that like I'm a perfectionist or anything like that, but like I suppose like now at this point I'm kind of like you, and kind of being business headed towards it. I'm like, I really want to like do well. Like,
Yeah.
like I really want to like perform well, or I really want to sing well, I really want this gig to go well, but like not like to the point of like it will kill me if it doesn't, but like more so,
Yeah.
more so just because like I have that ambition in me kind of now. Whereas like when we first started out, I mean, still learning about sound. I was still learning about live performing, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I thought every gig was fantastic. I truly know that is not that the case anymore. But I think I still get the same excitement, but it's kind of a little bit more, I hate to say this word, but in a more mature way. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
and as well, like obviously, there is obviously the age bracket thing as well. Like, I'm still young, but like my back is fucking sore as hell when I
Yeah.
so sleeping on floors probably like isn't always going to be like my favorite thing to do in the world, but it's still kind of like, I don't know, like I think going on tour really grounds me sometimes. It really like kind of puts me back into like this place where it's like, yeah, like this is brilliant.
Yeah, like I can relate to the back thing, but like now that cause so before all of lockdown and everything, like tail end of last year, beginning of this year, like I went full time tour managing sort of thing.
Okay.
So like one of the things that I made sure is wherever we were staying, I was the one that got the bed because I was like, no, I'm driving you motherfuckers. Like I get the bed sort of
I
thing.
mean, it's an unsaid rule, and like whoever's driving gets the bed. It shouldn't even be a question.
Yeah. But then in terms of you, like you mentioned, obviously going over to America. I know obviously you recorded Double Exposure out there, but just in terms of the band going to America, like I think is a bit more common nowadays that bands from the UK and Ireland and things are going there. But I remember not even 5 years ago, it was a huge deal to
Yeah.
do that. So, and especially like again, don't want to diminish Tipperary, but like coming from a small place in Ireland
Yeah.
to have that opportunity, what was kind of going through your mind, and like, was it just a surreal experience?
Honestly, Tim, that's like still to this day, like one of my biggest achievements is like being in a band that went to America. And like I know that like
Mm,
in what you said, like it's a little bit more common now. But I think for me it was like it was such a surreal environment around that time as well. Like, as I said, like we're from a really small town, like, and the people in the town who knew we were going to America, like, were so supportive of us going. Like, it was kind of like I think I remember hearing on Rob's podcast with you that like he told you that like there was like a newspaper article about us in the
yeah,
paper and stuff.
yeah,
And like, yeah, I don't even want to get into that, but like, yeah, it was kind of like they kind of overshot it a little bit. But like, even in terms of like we did a gig the night before it in our town, which was like just crazy because it's like this small town. There's no sea near, like, so but people came out, like, and like local pubs like rallied and gave us like some money towards our tour and stuff.
Oh
Like,
wow.
yeah, like I still remember, I actually still have the card that it came in my house. You know, like they gave us money towards, like, you know, here's a little bit of money towards it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know, when you were a child and like your, I don't know, like your grandmother would give you like a tenner going on your holidays. It was like
Yeah.
it was like the local people giving us a bit of money going over to America, you know. But yeah, it was a really, really absolutely amazing experience for us as a band, like, especially because like of where we're from, and like I suppose like we never really expected to get that far, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
But we did, and it was such an amazing experience. Like, I got to see America in the most beautiful way that like I could have ever seen America, like, you know. So
Yeah.
it's still such a big thing for me that like I got to do that while playing music, you know.
Yeah. And it's funny that you brought out that article because I kind of wanted to
Oh, really?
not sort of like bring that back, but just kind of like, is there still an affiliation with you guys and sort of being like, I don't want to say like the golden kids kind of thing, but like, do people in Tipperary still show an interest in the band and what you're doing?
Yeah, they do. Like, I mean, it's kind of like a small town anyway. So, like, it's kind of like everybody knows everybody's business, really.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like everybody knows that we're, you know, a big term in Ireland is, especially if you're playing music, is are you still at the music? That's
Right.
the term.
Okay.
Also, you know, quite a lot I will get conversations once a week, actually, Tim, to be honest, if I'm just up doing my stuff. It could be literally just like, oh, are you still at the music? Oh yeah, great, you know, you must be making some money. They always bring it back to money, and I'm always like, if you knew how much money I ever made from this band, like, but yeah, there's still that little bit of an affiliation, but I guess it was a little bit more excitable like 7 years ago, or like
Yeah, yeah,
5 years
yeah.
ago.
And then just in terms of kind of double exposure, like,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe it might be because I was kind of a bit more invested in what you guys were doing and kind of reading a bit more about you. But obviously, in the kind of run ups to that release of the record and stuff that you've done around it, both you and Rob had kind of openly said that this was more kind of about sort of accepting anxieties and sort of how you both were kind of dealing with those kind of things.
Mhm.
So, kind of looking back on that process, like, I don't know, have you kind of, I don't want to say overcome because you don't ever sort of overcome those things, but was that in one aspect a cathartic process, and two, did it help you kind of learn how to deal with those things in a more capable way, I guess?
Yeah. I think when I look back on double exposure and like the process of like going and recording that, and you know, even like writing stuff on paper like a year before that, like lyrically, like I think when I look back on that now, I was a completely different person to who I am now.
Yeah,
Um and I think, you know, especially lyrically, like we've always been quite like I just, that's how I write. That's just like open lyrics for me. That's just, I
yeah,
don't really know how any other way. It definitely was a sense of letting go of things. I don't know how well I learned to cope with things, especially at that time, to be honest.
yeah,
Um, I think that that's more of a thing for me now. But yeah, I suppose like the way I see double exposure now is like that was like a time and place, and that was a time in, like, you know, I can only speak for myself, but like that's a time in my life that was what it was. And although, like, you know, it took me quite a while to actually kind of process quite a lot of what was going on around that time, um I guess it's only now in hindsight that I'm kind of like actually learning from all of the things that I was going through,
yeah, yeah,
you know. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like it's a tough one. Like it always feels good to get like music out and stuff, and it's always like this feeling of letting go. But I don't know. I think when you get a bit older or something, it's kind of like it's a different thing for me now. I can't really
yeah.
explain it too well. Um,
So- And then just in terms of kind of like, as you say, kind of you've always written quite openly and things like that. And as I mentioned, when I kind of discovered you, it was very much the right sort of time and place. And I think the the way I'm going to want to wear this might sound a bit weird, but in terms of your position now in the band as the woman in the band,
Mhm.
and like I think the style of music that you play, obviously, a lot of women and younger women are drawn, especially when they're kind of discovering alternative music, are kind of drawn to that sort of thing. So I don't want to say there's a responsibility on your shoulders or whatever, but do you feel that because you've been very open about what you talk about, and I don't like you said you're quite introverted, but obviously this conversation now, like you're very sort of chatty and open, and the brief exchanges we've had in person, like you're very sort of approachable. So
Thanks.
is that something that you kind of like? I don't want to openly encourage that, like if there is, I don't know, like a 15, 14 year old coming to a Winter Passing show, that you're not there as emotional support, but like you're there, you are approachable, you are that person that can be spoken to rather than somebody that's not attainable, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. And I 100% know what you're going towards here as well. And it's like, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but like, it's kind of like, I love people. Like, I love
Yeah.
chatting with people. I love, but as I said, I am actually quite introverted. It's actually outside of my, it's honestly kind of a learned thing for me to be, you know, out there and talking with people,
Yeah.
like, you know, doing that without anxiety sometimes isn't a thing for me. But I think if anything, I would the one thing I would hate to be is not approachable, in
Mm.
any environment, to be honest, because as I said, I love people. I love chatting with people. It's just and as well as that, like I think it's really important to be approachable, especially if you're like, you know, I'm not saying like I'm the head of any band, and I don't think
Yeah, yeah.
like, you know, I'm just playing music with my friends, but like I think it's important to, especially in the scene that I guess that we're in as well, like, you know, and especially like DIY, like, you know, you I don't ever want to come across as a, you know, can't talk to me kind of a thing, you know,
Yeah.
like that for me is, that would go on my bad list. You can't do things like
Yeah,
that, you
yeah.
know. But I think it's important to be a good person and, like, as I said, relatable, because like, I mean, that's exactly, I suppose, how I would have wanted things to be when I was discovering music, you know. Like if
Mm.
a young person was coming to a Winter Passing show now, I would hate for them to walk away thinking that it wasn't attainable to, like,
Yeah.
either be up there and doing that yourself, or, oh, they're like this far distant thing that I can't connect to. Because like I think that was like the thing for me when I was growing up. I used to see all these bands like in Krang magazine, and like if I had known then that like they're, you know, probably in bands like, you know, the of a DIY ethos maybe
Yeah.
as well, that like, but I think like when you're growing up looking at bands in like, you know, magazines and like television and stuff, you're kind of almost kind of think that they're like otherworldly or something. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, I remember, like, honestly, I remember this is such a weird story to tell, but like on my 16th birthday, I went to go see Taken Back Sunday in Dublin.
All
And
right.
yeah, and while I was like, you know, watching the support band, which were Twin Atlantic, I think, and I literally saw Adam Lazara like literally standing in the crowd, and I was like, I lost my shit. Like I was like, oh my god. I was like, fuck, it's my 16th birthday. This is amazing. So I went up to him, of course, and like, you know, I was like, yay, hi then. And I was like, you know, tipping, I was like, excuse me, sir. And I was like, you know, can I get a picture or whatever? And he was just like, no. And I was
Oh
like,
no.
yeah. And I was like, okay, sorry. And I walked away. But I have two feelings about that. So my first feeling is, now that I'm like much older and understand the way gigs work, that guy was probably just trying to like stay incognito, watch the band, enjoy
Yeah.
himself a little bit. He did not need someone coming up like absolutely like, you know, blowing his cover. But then the second thing, I remember still feeling after that, I was kind of like, oh yeah, like that is the thing. There is that bridge. There's, you know, between me and him. You know, it's like
Yeah.
this unapproachable thing, you know. But yeah, I not that I think that I'm in any way on par with Taking Back Sunday in terms of popularity or anything, but like, you know, in terms of like, you know, being approachable, like it's actually super important for me to know that like if I'm at a gig that like if I'm up at the merch table that someone can come and approach me, to be honest. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
And on that aspect, like, as kind of sticking with the lyrics and things like that, as you said, like quite open and quite personal, and but still wanting to be relatable.
Mm.
Have you had instances of where people of any gender, however they identify, come up to you and say, "Thank you for saying this. This has really meant a lot to me." And have those conversations come about?
Yeah, I've had a couple of people say to me and also like write to me about a couple of things, but mostly about song escapism on
Mm.
exposure. So yeah, I think that would probably be the most that like people have wrote to me or said things about, like, you know, or it's like kind of like a solidarity kind of thing, like, oh, like
Yeah.
I know how that feels, like, you know, without even like sometimes saying those words, like that's what we're talking about when we are talking about escapism, where we know that we've both felt,
Yeah.
you know. So, and like that for me is like it's a huge honor, really. Like it's like to have someone um actually connect with your words, like it's it's just crazy because like they're just words
Yeah.
that I just wrote in a book, and
Yeah.
I was hoping to, you know, put to music one day, you know. But for someone to like really connect with that and like actually say like I that touched me, like, you know, that like that for me is like, yeah, it's not the only reason I do it, like because there's lots of reasons why I do it, but it's definitely one of the main reasons. It's like because
Mm.
music for me is such a thing that like it's been a part of self-care before I even knew what self-care was, you know. And
Yeah.
to connect with music is like been a huge part of like taking care of myself since I was like a kid, you know.
Yeah. And before we kind of move on to new ways of living, obviously, I know when I sort of spoke to Rob, it was sort of the first kind of time that he'd moved on to bass, and you've had various sort of changes in sort of lineup, but the core has always been you, Rob, and Jamie, sort of thing. But have those kind of lineup changes, has that kind of been something where the people have just kind of slotted in seamlessly, or were there ever times when you were kind of thinking like, oh, this is a bit of a chore, like, do we kind of take a back step and kind of reassess, or was it always like, no, we need to find someone to fill in these gaps, we can make it work, sort of thing?
I think like with the Winter Pass, and we've always had this thing with drummers, like we've just like had so many drummers. Like it's
Yeah.
actually like a joke that we have like all the time. It's like there's definitely no one who hasn't played drums for the Winter Passing. But I think the lineup that we have now, it just went together, like, you know, like as if it was always that way. Like Kevin
Yeah.
McCarthy, like Kev's been a part of our band now for God, like, it feels like he's never been not in the Winter Passing, really.
Yeah.
And like Marty joined in the last couple of years, and honestly, it feels like it it was the most refreshing thing we could have done, because like we, not that it had gone stale or anything. Like, I mean, we always say that like the core, Robert, Kate, and Jamie, there would not be one without the other, you know. And
Yeah.
but it was so refreshing because it's like two different sets of complete beings and complete different musical interests and complete different like opinions and stuff. And it was kind of like it really formed the band, like you know, we were already kind of like all like a fam, well, we are family, but like actual
Yeah.
family, you know. um
Yeah.
but like we are such a close knit now, like, and like it actually kind of accelerated the music for us a lot. It wasn't, I mean, it wasn't always as seamless as, you know, Kev and Marty just being in the band. Like, obviously, as I said, like, we've had our fair share of drummers.
Yeah.
Most bands do, actually. Like, it's kind of like, you know, it's like gold dust. It's like,
Yeah.
drummer goes, it's like, where are we going to find another drummer? But Kev and Marty kind of like completed our band. Like, it's kind of like as if it should have always been them, you know?
Yeah. And one more thing before we do move on to the new record.
Yeah.
I did a bit of snooping and saw that you're sort of finished your first year of your master's degree. So what are you studying, and what's kind of the aim to do?
Yeah, so I'm doing a master's in counseling and psychotherapy at the moment.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a huge lifestyle change for me last year. Like, just mega. It's something that I've always been really interested in. Like, mental health is a huge topic of interest to me. Like,
Yeah.
And I suppose, like, I've always kind of had quite a caring personality. As I said, I love people. I love taking care of people. A little bit, probably too much, to be honest. But yeah, like, I'm like the big worrier in the band. Like, I worry about everything, you know. But yeah. So I think it was at the end of September, the end of July last year. Do you ever just like feel a need for change? Like, I was just kind of like, you know, I just like, it's like, I know I need to go and do something. I just don't know what it is yet. And like, I've been reading, like, you know, psychotherapy and counseling theories since, like, I don't know, like 10 years ago. Like, it just, I'm so interested in it. And yeah, so I just bit the bullet, really, Tim, to be honest. And I just said, right, I'm going back to college, which was like a big lifestyle change for me, something that I was not prepared for. Because like, I had been to college before, but I had been like a fair few years out of it. So I suppose, like, I was really hit with like a ton of bricks with the whole, like, oh shit, this is difficult. It was really, really hard. Like, but I'm so glad, like, I'm so glad I have year one done. I'm excited to do year two. Like, I guess, like, my, you know, the hope would be to, I don't know, practice that in a setting that I would love to work more so in a line of like a women's refuge kind of
okay, cool.
Yeah, that's what I would love to do. Either that, or I would love to kind of get into like school counseling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think at the moment I'm just really enjoying kind of having like this, it kind of feels like something kind of new for me, if you know, because like I've kind of, you know, music has always been like my side thing, you know. Well, not my side thing. For a long time it was kind of like my main thing. My job was actually the side thing, but like it was kind of like, I don't know, I was just kind of I needed the change, and it's kind of like, it's exciting to kind of be like aiming towards something that's completely like just after hitting me like a ton of bricks.
Fair enough. Well, as I say, we'll get on to the new record, and like, I'm just super excited for people to hear it. Like, I mean, I've been a fan of you guys for ages, and it's just nice for you to have new winter passing music. But the one thing that I touched upon right at the beginning of this chat, which I think may shock a lot of people, but I think it fits really well, is there is a big pop sensibility in this record. Like, you've always been known to have like hooks and sort of catchy bits to your songs, but there are like the song Cry Baby, which people will hear, that is an absolute banger. So like, I don't know, what was the thought process of kind of wanting to lean more in that direction and kind of have that more kind of poppy aspect to the album?
Yeah, I don't know if it was like I don't know if we said it out loud, maybe, but I think like when we were obviously kind of in the writing process of like getting an album together, we kind of did know that we wanted to kind of I don't know, like, not go away from our roots of where, you know, like A Different Space of Mind, or like the other two songs that we have put out kind of like the last couple of years. Like, we didn't, it's not that we wanted to get away from any of that sound. It was kind of more so that, like, you know, it was kind of, I suppose it was kind of what we were maybe listening to maybe at the time, and like
Yeah.
some influences and stuff. But yeah, like the song Cry Baby is definitely like, whoa. It was
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
even when I heard it for the first time, I was kind of like, what? Because Jamie wrote that song like musically or whatever, and it was just like when we heard it, we were like, this is the funkiest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It felt like a little bit outside of our realm or something, a little bit, but it was kind of like as soon as like we started putting like everything on top of that and like lyrics and stuff, it was like, shit, this is so cool.
Yeah.
I think that kind of excited us a lot in terms of like the album, because it was like, again, not that we're trying to get away from who we are or what music we make, but it was just kind of like it was just super exciting to hear something that was kind of like, I don't know, just like super different for us.
Yeah.
I'm really excited that you brought up that song actually.
It's just like because I've been lucky enough to have the album in advance, and like you said, like when I heard that, I was like, oh, this is different. And then like I went back a second time, I was like, oh, I really like this. And then I went back a third time, and it's just like that chorus is just an earworm. So
Oh, that's cool. It was funny, like when we were recording that with Neil, like my vocal parts in that were like kind of like they're just so out, like far not outside of the realm of what I can do or anything, but like it just felt like uh it felt like sassy and cool, and like
yeah,
and like I think I still remember Robert like being like, okay, Kate, Whitney Houston, do it. And he just like, and I was like, yeah, yes, kind of,
I
but
was gonna
no.
say it's bringing back Britney Spears. You had your Britney Spears moment.
I always had a plan in place for this band.
Then in terms of like the album as a whole, like again speaking to Rob, and you've said it in previous interviews that everything that the Winter Passing does is very collaborative. So was that again sort of the same kind of process this time round? And like, did you have a different approach to sort of how you approached lyrics this time round, or was it still very much like going in with the ideas, hashing it out with everyone else, sort of thing?
Yeah, so I suppose like lyrically, me and Rob kind of always do it quite collaboratively. But I suppose this time we actually we each took a bunch of songs that we were like, okay, like songs that were completely finished or songs that were kind of just like nearly there, and we
Yeah,
took half, and like songs that we were maybe vibing with maybe, and we're like, okay, you take this punch and I'll take this punch, and we'll see what happens, and come back with like melodies, lyrics, and once we come back into the space, let's see what we have. And that's what we did. And you know it's it's a very interesting way of doing it, because like I guess like as well as like us both kind of like producing lyrics and melodies, it's cool because like even though we both separated like a couple of songs each, we came back into the space and was like, oh yeah, that sounds really cool, but what if we do it this way? And like that, it would be like a completely different and fresh new set of eyes and ears on it. And
yeah,
it like kind of really kind of again accelerated they, like, I suppose I can only speak for lyrically, and yeah, it kind of like accelerated that a lot for us, like
mm,
so it's still kind of the same process for us lyrically, I guess, but I suppose like musically it was a bit different this time because like we were all from different kind of places in Ireland, so
yeah,
it's a little it's kind of gone into the technology age of like where when we
yeah,
were like recording like a different space of mind, like it was out in my backyard of my parents' house, like, and them songs were being made there, and like whereas now it was kind of like, oh hey, I dropped a file into the drive, like have listened to it, and we're all like, oh my
yeah,
god, this song is sick. So it was a different setup, but we'd always bring it back into like the practice space and be like, okay, wow, let's work this out together, let's like put things on top of things. And like so
yeah,
it was interesting because it was kind of it felt like a long time in a process of doing it, because like it did take a long time. And I think as well as that, like, it was because, you know, we're at this point where we're all from different like necks of woods, and we're all at different kind of like places in life at the moment. So like it was kind of like, it was a different process in the sense of like it wasn't like 100% done like all in the same room together at all times.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
kind of, you know, it was definitely a process of like us all kind of collaborating once we actually were together, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I can't remember if I asked Rob this or not, but I kind of want to get your take on it, even if I did. But I always find it interesting when there's two vocalists in a band. And I think with you and Rob having such distinctive voices as well, it kind of lends itself to this question. But in terms of when you're sort of dividing the lyrics up, like, I don't know, it might be going back to that collaborative thing, or you might have a specific feeling in mind. But do you, I guess, kind of like when you're writing something out, like, I guess just as pure lyrics as a basic on a sheet of paper sort of thing, do you have in mind like, oh, that bit would sound good if it was sung by Rob, or oh, I definitely want to sing this bit sort of thing? Like, how do you kind of split the roles sort of thing?
Honestly, sometimes I think personally, like when I write down lyrics, like I'm not really sure what's going to happen with them. Like
Yeah.
I'm writing them out and I'm kind of like, Jesus, I didn't know I felt that way, kind of a thing. But I think what really kind of happens is when it comes back into the space of us like actually making a song out of these lyrics, making it a full thing, like again, it does come back to the whole collaboration thing. Like, you know, it's not really about like who can sing it better, but it's just like, you know, sometimes it's logistics as well. Like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, can I sing this while playing this? What, you know, it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like, you know, but I guess like maybe there's some parts in certain songs that I've been like, I just think that would sound maybe better with my voice. And again, with Robert, like there's actually quite a few parts on the new album that like would have originally been me singing, but I'd like, I think it would sound better with Rob singing here, or like
Yeah.
versa. And I think that's like the beauty of like not being in any way kind of like, you know, caring about like who sings what really. Like
Yeah.
we just wanted to always sound the best it can sound, you know.
Yeah.
That's always the thing with the Winterpass, and it's like it's not who gets to like do the thing, it's like how does it sound, you know.
Yeah. And in terms of like the album itself, obviously, without this kind of being the cliched question of, oh well, you've grown as a band sort of thing, but that it's the obvious thing. But like when you're kind of going into the process of kind of approaching it, did you have kind of any like themes or anything like that that you wanted to kind of approach it? Like, there's something that I want to bring up in a minute that kind of highlighted in the whole like press junket that I got sent, but I just kind of wanted to get your sort of
Yeah,
from the horse's mouth, so to say, of like what you were kind of thinking of putting into this record.
yeah. I suppose because again, because I was doing like I've kind of started this course a year ago. I've went on this kind of like, I don't want to sound like in any way like, you know, I don't really know what word I'm going to put on this, but like um I have actually done like a lot of like self-discovery, and
Yeah.
like I know that just sounds like so like live, laugh, love, mom kind of thing, but like honestly, like it has been such a journey for me. Even the word journey is annoying me, but like I think a lot of those themes really came into it for me. And again, when we were speaking about double exposure, like again, I was a completely different person. The lyrics that I was writing then was about a time that I really didn't really feel too great, to be honest. And I
Yeah.
didn't, you know, although I could process those things and although I could deal with those things, I was a different person personally. I really didn't know myself, to be honest. So in the last year, I suppose, and a little bit before that as well, like I kind of like, you know, I wanted to my side of the lyrics, I kind of wanted to bring up some themes, I suppose, about like being nicer to myself, to be honest. About
Mm.
that, you know, I've spent so many years like writing lyrics about like how I feel bad. I wanted to, and not that I don't think that like I still write lyrics like that, but like, you know, but more so like how I have gotten through a lot and how I've kind of like got better, you know, and not better, but like just, you know, me like
yeah, better within yourself, sort of thing.
yeah, exactly, like so like I've kind of like, you know, given up a couple of ghosts in order to for me to be able to be like, you know, I'm okay with who I am a little bit, like, you know, I'm not always perfect, I'm not always like, you know, the best I can be, but like I know myself a lot better now, Tim, and like it's kind of like a thing that like it's really hard work to get to know yourself, because like some parts of yourself you don't want to get to know, and you know,
Yeah.
and I think that for me was a big thing lyrically on this album for my thing. And I suppose as well, you know, there would have been a lot of I'm not sure what you're going to bring up, but I feel like it's maybe the second song on the album, maybe.
Oh no.
Okay.
It's more kind of the way that the press release is kind of a wording of in that, and I just kind of wanted to see if I could kind of get you to expand on it a bit, because
Okay.
we've mentioned obviously about double exposure was kind of about your anxieties and things like that,
Hmm.
but the line that it said in the press release was this is kind of about Irish working class anxieties, and I
Mm.
just kind of wanted to kind of get what your kind of feeling of that is. Can you kind of just expand on that a bit more, because I think like anxiety as a whole is kind of something that a lot of people deal with and kind of have different ways of coping with it and so on and so forth. But to kind of narrow it down to that bracket, I just kind of wanted to kind of delve into that a bit more, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I guess like for me, my understanding of that is kind of like, um, how do I put it? It's kind of like there is a certain culture in Ireland, especially I suppose around, I suppose, especially around mental health, really.
Mm.
Specifically, I guess as well around, you know, men, and also like, you know,
Yeah.
the town that I would be from, like I mean, it's a town of working class people, really, and you know, there is this certain culture around like, you know, just getting on with things. It's hard to explain when you're not Irish. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like this thing of how do I explain it? It's like as Irish people, we learn to just get on with things, no matter
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
hard they get, no matter how we don't talk about it, we don't speak about it, we don't utter a word about how we feel because that would be wrong. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So sorry to interrupt you, but I kind of get what you mean. So because I have like my mum's side of the family are Irish, and
Ah,
very
yeah.
much they very much have that mentality. So
So you can see
yeah,
the
I get.
shadow. You can see the shadow
Yes.
that
Yeah.
follows all of, yeah. It's kind of like, you know, this whole thing of just getting on with things no matter how crap they feel, or like how like, you know, buried you feel like underneath like the things you have to deal with in your life, not because like you chose them, but because like society put them on you, really.
Yeah.
um so I suppose like for me that's my understanding of it. Like maybe Rob has a completely different understanding of it, like,
Yeah.
um but I guess like my side of lyrics probably wouldn't have been like, you know, 100% like about that either. um
Yeah.
my side of things would have been a little bit kind of more on the side of like self actualization kind of thing, and like,
Mm.
um but what do you think it kind of like, I'd like to get like your understand as a reader of that, like.
Well, that's kind of like why, because I think it was just that kind of it being so specific to the Irish working class that I was just so sort of drawn to. Because it, as you say, like the family that I do have over there, like I haven't seen since I was a kid, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
like even like just from like my mum's sort of side of things, I totally can relate to that sort of. You just kind of get on with things and kind of ignore the issues, the overriding issue sort of thing. So
We don't
I
talk
can.
about issues in Ireland, like as in like we, if we can bury them under a carpet in a family system, we're going to do that. It's anything to
Yeah,
go bring it up in the room, you know. But especially like emotions a big thing, but like even
yeah,
apart from that, like, you know, the life you lead like in Ireland as a working class person is, again, like it's kind of like especially with the ethos of get on with things, doesn't matter how hard it feels, doesn't matter how you know, this wasn't your choice, kind of a thing. Just get on with it. It's not like, you know, everybody feels this way, kind of a thing. Or I guess like, this is just life. Life's hard.
Yeah.
Just get on with it, kind of a thing. It's kind of a thing that is kind of like all, it's ingrained into us before we even get a choice to think about it, if you know what I mean. It
Yeah.
was like there would have been like a few like points on the album, I know especially for Robert, that like he would hit on that, because like he, I guess he feels it, like, you know, and like being from like a smaller Irish town as well, it's kind of like, you know, it on a level that's like a lot different than you would maybe if like, I don't know, it's kind of like the small town living kind of like culture and system of, you know, get on with it, everything's grand,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
And just in terms of kind of like when the album's sort of coming out, obviously, I know it's a bit of a weird situation because obviously, usually you'd be touring or and sort of, I know you're doing this interview for me, but obviously doing various other sort of press things and stuff like that. But like overall, like what do you kind of want like fans to kind of take away from this record?
Um, I definitely just want people to like enjoy it anyway.
Yeah,
Just like please like it. But I think take away from it, I think even if people just connect with it, I'd be like super happy about that, you know.
mm,
I think, you know, there's a lot of topics on this album that like, I suppose there might not have been areas that we kind of hit on, you know. And I suppose it's coming out at like a very, very strange time. It's kind of like, you know, it feels like, I don't know how this is going to feel really, to be honest, because like, I guess we had so many plans in place before, obviously, the pandemic, as every other band in the whole entire world did. So
yeah,
it kind of does, it does feel like it's like, it, it's this kind of like unknowing feeling of like what Friday is going to be like, you know, when we
yeah,
release an album, that we're like unsure of when we're going to play music, you know. But I think to take away from it, if anyone listens to it, it's just that, you know, life is hard, but like we can 100%, you know, do hard things. And like that
yeah,
100%, like that, although, and I'm speaking from like complete another like experience, that like, you know, there is genuinely always kind of like, I'm not going to say a light at the end of a tunnel, but like there's someone holding something to like be able to see what's ahead, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And I think like if people were just like a little bit nicer to themselves, like it would be actually like, you know, healing for everybody. But I think for anyone to just even connect with the music, it would be fantastic.
mm,
Just amazing, really. It's mad that like I still get to do this stuff, you know.
yeah. And you mentioned like, obviously like you guys had plans and stuff obviously before all the pandemic and stuff kind of hit and things, and
Yeah.
obviously a, my memory has lost me and I should have made a note of it, but you did have a tour planned and things like that. But have you guys kind of spoken about when it's looking likely that you're going to get in a room again? Have those conversations been had? And like, have you kind of started spitballing like, well, we could potentially aim for a plan on this date to start doing shows again or things like that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't like exactly thought about like when is going to be our next like live gig, because like everything just feels very uncertain right now. It's just like, you
Mm,
know, even though like restrictions are being lifted at the moment, like, you know, it's kind of at the moment it kind of still feels like it's just, it's not, it's just not in reality at the moment or something, you know, even to
yeah.
think about like gigging and stuff. But like, I mean, we booked a gig for next year, so like I, for us,
Yeah.
like for us it's kind of like at the moment it's like, because I won't lie, like we all felt like really, really bummed out about like, because we had like a really big year ahead, like, and even be like, even before you know, the record coming out, we had like so many plans and stuff, so we
Yeah.
all took a really hard hit with all of that. And I suppose like we don't want to like get our hopes up with like, you know, oh maybe by, I don't know, Christmas. But like we have kind of like, you know, toyed around with the idea of like possibly maybe after Christmas, maybe at that end of the year, maybe. But I think at this point we're kind of just like hoping to get into a room at some point, just even to play music for ourselves.
Yeah.
Would be great, because like, it's kind of it's been crap not to be able to do that, we actually did do it recently enough, like we were all like, in my house, like socially distanced, and like just having
Yeah.
a sort of a jam or whatever. But like it it kind of just, it almost felt like wrong. It was like, we shouldn't be doing this. So at the moment, I guess we really don't know when it's going to be, but I'm excited for when it actually does happen.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Okay.
It's like, it's mad to even think about like us not being able to like play music like
Yeah,
live.
yeah. Perfect. Kate, how I like to end these is to ask my guest what their favourite song is, but with a bit of a twist. And I know it's been a while, but what is your favourite winter passing song that you like to play live, and why?
Oh crap. Okay. Okay. I really want to say one of the new songs. I really want to say one of the new songs. Can I have two?
Go on then.
Okay, so even though it hasn't been played live yet, just for ourselves, my favorite song to play live is the Street and the Stranger off the new record. And I suppose actually that we've played live for actual human beings outside of our realm was, I think it would be, God, it's so hard because I actually just like, I'm kind of like our biggest fan, I think. I love all our songs. I think maybe Patience Please. I think Patience
Okay.
Please. Yeah, that's my favorite song to play live because it's kind of like heavy hitter, emotional. Feels good to
Yeah,
get to the end of that song and like absolutely bash the keys.
that's cool. I was interested to see if you and Rob would have the same, but you had different ones. So
Oh, did we?
yeah, Rob went with Paper Rabbit.
Oh yeah, well of course he did. Actually, yeah, he's like, yeah, of course he did.
Brilliant. Kate, thank you very much for taking some time to do this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully, we'll see you over here a lot sooner rather than later. And I hope everyone loves the record as much as I love it, because it's fucking rad. So
Oh, thank you
yeah,
so
people go
much.
check it out.
Thank you.
No
I really
worries. Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, Tim.
So there we have it, folks. A massive thank you to Kate for having a little chat with me. As mentioned before, A New Way of Living is out now on Big Scary Monsters Records and on all various streaming platforms. And as always, we will have all the links to the Winter Passings, various social media platforms, in the description notes of this episode. Also, if you want to hear the chat that we had with Kate's brother and fellow The Winter Passing member, Rob Flynn, then you can go back, listen to episode 83. We will also put a link to that in the description notes. So yeah, again, thank you for stopping by the Justin Insight podcast. Remember to subscribe, rate, review. 5-star rating would be preferable. That would be lovely. But until next time, I will see you soon.